This is the Frazzled American News Headline Review Program, programming of ISAM Crozier's Revolution for Reason, an advertising vehicle for isamcrozier.proboards.com. To join the conversation, join in at isamcrozier.proboards.com. You may be alone for a while. All money supported can be forwarded through patreon.com/isamcrozier. Become a patron at your pleasure at patreon.com/isamcrozier. All transcripts for this and other content can be found at isamcrozier.medium.com. A paywall is involved. Follow this or other programming of this channel at isamcrozier.medium.com. And for only $50, you too can read what I said here today. The podcast can be found for preview or sample at YouTube or SoundCloud.com. The podcast is available for download at Stitcher, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, and soon to be available through other sources that I have never heard of. Revolution with Reason is a news and philosophy opinion review channel. The joke is to tell everyone that I'm special. The punchline is that I wasn't special when I started. I do my best. Here's hoping I am able to inform you of what you did not already have to work with. Before we begin, I want to inform you of the short duration of my first broadcast period, lasting only a little over a week. If you enjoy my programming, please expect me to come back midweek of the month of February 2021. Due to circumstances outside of my control, I will not be able to broadcast during the interim. Now on to the trending headlines. These are last night's trending headlines, delivered this morning. The links to which can be found by way of my brand-centric Medium page, the address of which you have heard before, isamcrozier.medium.com. A paywall is involved. Tonight's top story relates entirely to President Donald J. Trump. While he denies any wrongdoing in the events of the riots of January 6, 2021, a story is breaking even now that President Trump refused to aid those persons securing the Capitol building grounds. In the story related by Talking Points memo, President Donald J. Trump is said to have returned to the White House excitedly after giving a speech to the insurrectionists and watched the riots on TV. I have had a great many practices at making jokes at the expense of Donald Trump, who gives little thought to ethics as he does a short-selling focused business. I'm worried my best friend over there has me thinking of selling the country to a military junta. According to truthout.org, there is legal evidence that President Trump can be indicted for his role in the events of January 6, 2021. I think perhaps I would get my investment back. Military junta, anyone? A bill has been entered in the Congress to impeach the president, Donald J. Trump. The bill, titled H.R.E.S. 26, was raised by over 200 representatives with the explicit intent of impeaching President Donald Trump. I guess you can't always get your investment back when you're short. Isn't that right, best friend? The fallout of the riots of January 6, 2021 are still ongoing, but they have not created any systemic changes or systemic irregularities, so I will not cover them. The FBI is asking for America's help in identifying one rioter. Since this is a special case, and due to the paywall at my Medium page, the link to the story will be in the description wherever you find this podcast. The foreigner, Ivanka Trump, thinks she'll be President of the United States of America one day. It's almost like everybody can live the dream except for the million of Americans who don't seem to be able to establish a stable career. AP News reports. Ex-Michigan Governor Rick Snyder has been informed that he and other ex-officials from his staff are being charged against their roles in the Flint, Michigan water scandal of 2014. The story does not say what they will be charged for, and the speaker needed to speak under the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly. These charges come after the Michigan State Attorney General, Dana Nessel, dismissed the previous set of charges in a much criticized move. This joke writer needs respond. I'm glad to see that someone fumbled, but I would still prefer a slower news day. Companies, from tech firms to credit cards, are canceling their programs of campaign contributions for the ongoing duration. But since this is an action of convenience that doesn't appear to have any preparation into the occasion beyond the smash and grab political tactics they were already using, I would say that it is no change, and the irregularity involved is the power the company has over the voices of their employees. This statement is the extent to which I will cover this issue. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has been snubbed by European leaders and, as consequence, has canceled his last Europe trip. I guess that accounts for good taste. Alright, next story. The FBI has opened 160 cases related to the January 6, 2021 riots in Washington, D.C. There were counted there 2,000 people. This speaks very highly of prescriptive or preemptive response, as the FBI can't be expected to do it all. I miss Madam Michelle Obama. Amazon and Facebook employees have been warned against backlash against big tech as the cleanup of the fallout of January 6, 2021 continues. Etsy has found that the Camp Auschwitz t-shirt, a t-shirt coincidentally premiered with the vandalization of a Jewish cemetery near the Auschwitz detention camp landmark, was being sold through their website and have summarily removed the item for sale. Amazon has done likewise with QAnon merchandise. It is not yet known if the employees of these social media providers are considering an office pool to pay for a rapper's entourage. Facebook has announced that it will be ramping up enforcement against the phrase "Stop the Steal," instead of doing anything to dilute the conversation happening on the platform. My imagination suggests that the Band-Aid company has no response. This just in. Barack Hussein, I won't do anything for the public option Obama, has spoken up against the repression of speech with me. That still doesn't make us cool. We do so because in a diverse society, efforts to restrict speech can quickly become a tool to silence critics and oppress minorities, he is quoted as saying in the Washington Post, adding, "The strongest weapon against hateful speech is not repression, it is more speech. The voices of tolerance that rally against bigotry and blasphemy, and lift up the values of understanding and mutual respect." Like pickles on the internet hate machine. It is tolerance. Federal prosecutors are considering felony murder charges in the case of rioters who took part in the mayhem of January 6, 2021. This joke writer believes that the murder would be a ruling consistent with other rulings, and would state a preference for the outcome to be level with other outcomes that have happened before. A Massachusetts congressional representative has been removed from the advisory board of her alma mater after having made false claims about voter fraud in last November's presidential election. This person was a Harvard graduate, a school known for turning out ruthless winners who do what it takes. This raises a question for this joke writer. Shouldn't I already know why the politician prefers to run the risky gambit, instead of installing corrective education into the grassroots? A former Minneapolis police officer who was seen on camera holding his knee to a 46-year-old man's neck has been arraigned to be tried separately from 3 other former officers accused in the man's death. The officers were responding to a 911 call in which the man was alleged to have paid for a consumable with counterfeit money. The separate arraignment is apparently a result of COVID-19 regulations being difficult to handle. In the story, some concern is being shown that the other 3 officers may experience a spillover effect that influences their trial. In this story, it is clear that George Floyd will finally see some non-fatal tactics used in his case. The Chicago Crusader reports, on the morning of New Year's Day in Newark, New Jersey, police officer Rod Simpkin shot 39-year-old Carl Dorsey III under questionable conditions. Witnesses reported that Mr. Dorsey had been unarmed, with his hands high, backing away from the officer and following instructions. It seems apparent that the firearms needed to stay in the car. According to the ODMP memorial page, there were 4 officer deaths in Newark, New Jersey in 2020, and all 4 were for COVID-19. Can we get the cop guns off the street and stop disturbing the peace? 2 U.S. Capitol Police officers are being suspended for taking photos with persons now designated as rioters and being kind to them. It is not known at this time if there is anything that can be said in the defense of the 2 officers, such as what announcement was made at the breaking of the barricades. Loosely regarding the cancer that is making incels of B. Failed corporate overlords Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani, CEO and COO respectively, are being accused in court this week of the destruction of evidence in a corporate corruption case against Theranos Healthcare Technology Services. According to the story, the company heads were able to find a lawyer as corrupt as themselves and destroyed the records in a bid to fraudulently comply with court orders. Holmes and Balwani each face a dozen criminal wire fraud charges apiece. I thought that pause was needed. Holmes and Balwani each face a dozen criminal wire fraud charges apiece. And one thing is certain. Something is stinking at the convenience consumption. In another story loosely regarding the cancer, Bitcoin millionaires are waking up this week to lost passwords as their access to their crypto wallets appear to have been fumbled. The story, from the New York Times, features an expose on one programmer who encrypted his passwords behind a password and did not make a backup. The general tone of the story is that people should not need to be their own bank. While I agree with liberty, I guess everyone needs an advisor. In a more intimate story tonight, the parents of a 12-year-old girl who died of lice infestation have been granted bail because prosecutors have not yet sought their indictment by a grand jury. I would like to raise to your attention that this young girl was an American, and neither were her rights to be prescribed by her state of quarter, or her rights were not to be prescribed by her parent. no matter if her parents were guilty of neglect that led to murder. Her state was guilty of not having a home for her among the glorious red, white, and blue tapestries of American government. The FBI is warning law enforcement this week that there are to be 3 possible armed protests in Nashville, Tennessee, before the official inauguration of Joe the Sexual Predator Biden. I guess that's a weather report for the Nashville, Tennessee area. The report expands to all 50 state capitals and Washington, D.C. between January 16th and January 20th. I will continue to report on the temperatures that may impede your regional travel as I find them. The Smithsonian, as well as other museums in the country, are in a race to collect artifacts regarding the riots of January 6, 2021 in Washington, D.C. It is most worrying that they do not appear concerned with collecting any of the degrees of philosophy underlying the case, cause, and effect movement supporting Donald Trump. Could they at least collect the degrees of Kevin Bacon? COVID is still bad this week. I thought that pause was needed. You're going to need to sit down for this one. COVID is still bad this week, as a report from Johns Hopkins University tallies the past week's daily death toll at over 3,000 people. Those are numbers on par with the losses during the September 11, 2001 attacks. Like with any disability, I wouldn't want to be standing where the COVID unfortunate are. The CDC is changing its COVID-19 vaccine allocation to favor states that can disseminate it the fastest. This is yet another reason the state of California needs a Scrum framework policy. Now for some uplifting news. God, we need it. The Hindustan Times report that the CIA documents related to UFOs have been declassified this week as the CIA does its part to try to regulate America's political temperature. For those who are interested, the documents are named the Black Vault. In other news, Disneyland is to serve as the COVID-19 vaccination site in Orange County, California. It is not known at this time if that makes Mickey Mouse available for vaccination as a first responder. Talking Points memo featured an expose on a bill ready to enter Congress to, quote, revitalize our crumbling democracy, disempower the politicians who incited a riot, and usher in a new era of citizen equality. This For the People Act sounds pretty nifty. After success producing a COVID-19 vaccine, the Moderna pharmaceutical company has announced it's kicking off 3 new vaccination programs for seasonal flu, Nipah virus, and the HIV virus. The 3 vaccine programs will be based on the relatively new messenger RNA system, which Moderna used to develop its COVID-19 vaccine. It's almost like I'm less afraid to die now. The University of Berkeley has launched an online magazine to provide science-based insights on life and living. This magazine, located at greatergood.berkeley.edu, is a project that I support wholeheartedly, and although I'm not being paid for this sponsorship, nonetheless I will be sponsoring this magazine for some time to come. Again, that's greatergood.berkeley.edu. A website has been collecting advertisements for remote jobs and makes this information available to the public. Because of the paid nature of my format, the link for this website will be available through this content's description wherever you find this podcast. it would appear that some stipulations do apply. I will be sharing this link for the rest of the duration of the COVID response, or until I exhaust my resources for this podcast entirely, whichever condition may come first. This has been Isham Samuel Crozier, reading to you last night's trending headlines. And I am honestly fairly sure I'll get my investment back. Hippie-yi-yay, hippie-yi-yo. No, Lord. I am never gonna be a star. Alright, babe.